Hi, this is Val Campbell, and I want to welcome you to the First Chapter podcast. Today we're going to meet a new author. So without any further delay, let's jump right into it. What have you
So,
acted in?
I was in community theater for 30 years. So lots of things.
Fun. I love going to theater. It's not something I get to do nearly as often as I would like. I live in an area that's doesn't have much of that. I live over in Eastern Washington,
Right.
and so it's a different world over here. Very calm, very Mayberry RFD.
Right. Well, I started in high school, and in college I was a member of Alpha Psi Omega, which is the National Honor Drama Fraternity. I guess I still am. I don't know. They don't charge dues. I know what the secret handshake is. So. And then community theater. I was on the board of a local little theater, which is pretty big. And about 10 years ago, I got married and moved to Georgia. This was in South Carolina, where I was from.
Gotcha. So we are here today talking to Howard Loring and introducing him to the First Chapter podcast, or vice versa. And you wrote a book, a number of books actually, but the one that we're primarily talking about today is Piercing the Elastic Limit, right?
Yes, an epic fable. It's an epic.
And I listened to your submission of the first chapter. It's very interesting. You had Melissa Del Toro Schaffner do your narration on that.
Yes, I was very lucky to get her. She had done some short stories for me on her podcast. Dr. Richardson reached out to me. We were in the same writer groups, or some of the same. And I sent him material, and they've published 5 or 6 of my short stories. And they interviewed me a couple of times, and I asked her to narrate one of my novels, and she graciously said yes. It's great. She did over 60 voices of different accents and dialects, and it's over 8 hours long. It's 8 hours of awesome. So I was very pleased with that.
Melissa is brilliant. I didn't know her or know of her before listening to your watching your podcast with her. But I have to say that book, I think, from what I've heard of it, would have been difficult to narrate. The names, the cadence of the story, and her enunciation is impeccable.
Well, her pace and timing is superb as well, and there are certain passages that are building tempo and dramatic, and she just did a wonderful job. She just did a wonderful
she's
job. I was very lucky to get her. She does all kinds of national commercials, and she does a lot of internet animated stuff, voices for things of that nature, and she's in very high demand. And I was very lucky to get her.
Yeah, she did a great job, and for your part, excellently written, I will say.
Thank you. I've got news on that front, actually.
Really? Go ahead. Share it.
Well, the book is heavily laden with classical German musicians, 19th century musicians. Robert Schumann, his wife, Clara, who was much more famous than he was during his lifetime, and Brahms, Clara and Brahms edited Schumann's works after he died, spent 10 years doing it. And he had a journal as well as, a canon of written work, musical work. Mendelssohn is mentioned. Clara's father was the greatest piano teacher in Europe at the time. Everyone acknowledged that. Beethoven is discussed. Schubert is mentioned. Mendelssohn is a character in the book. So a music club contacted me in a big city about an hour away, a couple of hours away, and they wanted me to come and talk about the book, which I did last week. And it turns out that the National Federation of Music Clubs, which is a nationwide organization, the president of the federation belonged to that music club. And I met her, and she explained to me that in order for me to come and read and present and talk about the book, they had to clear it for study. So it has been, just last week I learned that the book has been cleared by the National Federation of Music Clubs for study, through their affiliated chapters, which are all over the country. And I had about a 20-minute talk where I explained the book and what I was trying to do. And I was very, very well received. It was very gratifying. So that's news on the book.
Well, that's exciting. I was just going to share that I don't know how you feel about these things, or maybe even other authors, but I find it sometimes difficult to read or listen to the work of other authors. It's kind of like being an expert in the construction industry. You walk into buildings and you see all the detail, right?
I understand that. Yeah.
And it's unusual that I see a piece of work that I don't pick up on the little nuances of editing issues and tense changes and some of these little things, and the reading public doesn't pick up on these things, and I almost feel sometimes like being an author, I'm cheated of my love of reading a little bit because I can just see these things.
I have an advantage there because I write epic fables, so they're fables. They're very simply written, but they're layered. They're epic in nature. They cover big psychological, that's not the term either, but universal constructs for humans. And so you're reading, and all of the books, except for the short stories, they have a middle and a beginning and an end, and you're 3/4 of the way through it before you grasp what it is that's totally happening. It's it's a convention I use, and uses real history and my time traveling apparatus and theory. They pass muster with the time travel crowd. They are rabid. They will pick you apart if your theory has got holes in it, or if you don't have a working machine. Although in my books, it always breaks down and the characters have to improvise. But yes, I had an advantage there because it's a quick read. It's very simply told, but it's layered like an onion. And when it dawns on you what's happening, you're already encompassed in a universal story. That is one that is, bigger than the narrative itself.
Fascinating. That would be definitely an advantage that I did not pick.
If you can do it, in other words, my books, they're not sequels. They stand alone. Right. And but they're all using the same jargon, the same machinery, they're the same people, really. I mean, you just don't know that at the time. Even the short stories. So it depends on how the more you read, the more you learn about the elastic limit of time and what the big deal is, even though they stand alone. And depending on the way in which you read them, the order in which you read them, the light bulb comes on differently. You say, oh, this is the guy in the second book or whatever. And, time is really fun to play around. I've got a book of short stories, 12 short stories. They are contained pieces. Each story is standalone. You can read them in it's just a short story about time and time travel. But if you read them in order, the 12 chapters tell the history of humanity. It's an adventure tale. It goes all the way through, but time is linear. So you can start this book of short stories. You can read the last chapter first and then go in reverse order. It's the same story from either direction. So you can read the book 3 different ways. You can read the stories independently. You can read them front to back. You can read them back to front. So, I don't think of another genre that you could do that.
Well, and it is very unique. I've never seen anything else like your work. How did you develop this? How did you get started in that genre?
Well, I'm an artist. I've been an artist all my adult life. I act, I paint. I'm a musician. I've got lots of YouTube videos. Howard Lauren Go. I've trained dinosaurs and whatnot. Take busloads of people back to the past and bring them safely back to the current reality. So I'm a sculptor. I'm a printmaker. I'm a master serographer, which is a screen printer. But I've done all kinds of, litho and offset and all kinds of printing. And I don't know, what else do I do? All kinds of, anyway, I always said I was going to write a book. And lots of people say that. They, never do. So I did write one. It took a long time. I wasn't really going to publish it. It was just an intellectual exercise for me. The creative flow, And I'm a voracious reader. So I may not have written a book before, but I know what bad writing is. So I wrote this book, and I was giving it to pieces of it to friends, or reading it to friends, and they convinced me to write to have it published. So then after that, they were pushing for another one. Well, I didn't want to write a sequel, so I wrote one that I'll start with an idea. And then the characters write the book. I may not know what's going on, but I trust that they do. And if I ever get stuck, excuse me, I'm burping. If I ever get stuck, I just reread what I've written. And by the time I get to the point where I laid off, the story continues. And I tried in the second book to write much the same thing, but in a different way. And then in the third book, I said, well, I got to do something totally different now, so I wrote short stories, which I'd never written before. Why I started writing time travel is I just sat down, I wrote a little story, and then I said, well, that's pretty weird. And then I wrote a different story, which was in a different time frame. And, in the first story, a guy was looking for something. And in the second, he was in a forest. In the second story, a guy was looking for something, and he was in a desert, because I wanted to make it different. And in each case, they found what they were looking for, but I didn't realize the significance of it but they did. So then I had a third. I said, well, I needed something else. Nothing's really happened in here, and so I said, well, I got two guys. Let's write a story of two women, which I did. They're looking for something. They find it. Okay, so then I went back. I had to join them in some way. So it had to be time travel. So, I went back, I rewrote it. They all started talking the same jargon. They all were looking, what they found was not the end of what they were looking for. It was just a piece. And I didn't know how it fit together, but they did. And so that's how it did, how it progressed. The second book, I had a weird idea. I always have a weird idea. And I start from that point. I've got these three books. The first one was 375 pages or so. The second one was like 250. The third one, the short stories on my computer, it was like 100 pages. I was getting better at what I was trying to do. They're just exciting adventure tales, and they have real history in them. And
I'm fascinated by what you just said there, because it's, our genres are pretty far apart, but your process, how you got here, is so precisely the same as mine. I had to laugh when you said, well, you might not know where the story's going, but you trust that your characters do. I mean, that's the kind of thing I would say. And my boys look at me and they say, Dad, these people aren't real.
Yeah.
They're real to me.
Yeah. They don't know they're not real. So,
do they wake you up in the middle of the night and tap on your forehead and say, hey, I got a story to tell?
No, it doesn't quite work that way for me, but I'm a good storyteller. I tell a good joke, and I know through my education and training or whatnot, I know what myth is, unspoken myth, and how it can convey. If you employ myth correctly, you can invoke a feeling, and the person doesn't even know take music. Music can make you laugh. It can make you cry. It can get you angry. It can, soothe you. And you don't know how the connection is made, but it's there. It's a direct connection. Words, you have to have symbols, of course. That's when the wordplay comes in and the turn of phrase, the pace, but you still have to, the myth has to fit together. Have you ever seen a movie, a play? It was filmed well, the acting was okay, but it just didn't make it for you. Well, probably the myth was mismatched. There's a formula, there's a hero formula, there's a, this formula, the da-da-da, this and that. Numbers are very important in myth because they're, it makes the connection for you instead of the other way. Look at all the classic stories. It can be a fairy tale, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It could be a TV show, Ben Cartwright and his three sons. It can be Star Wars or Little Orphan Annie. It doesn't matter the time frame. Little Orphan Annie had the dog and the bald-headed guy and the secretary that became the family unit. Princess Leia, she had her three sidekicks. And that's because with three, you have infinite variety. If you have a story with one character, it's boring. If you have a story with two characters, that's boring. It's the guy and the girl, and he gets the girl or he doesn't get the girl. Boring. But if you have three characters, the good guy, the girl, and the evil guy, well, then the evil guy can play off the girl, or or him, or that, or the girl can play off of this or that. You go forever. So that's a basic tool of myth making. You got to have three characters at a minimum to keep the interest up. And there's lots of ways you can employ myth, and it's it hits you in the face. You don't know why you're compelled to pull for this guy or what So the creative process is what I'm after. It's very gratifying when it's finished. And the first book I wrote, like I said, it took me a long time. And when I finally and I wasn't concerned on run-on sentences or comma splices, or if it was I knew I could go back and fix it, which is what I did. Once I had the end, I said, wow, this is pretty cool. And then the next one, I wanted to know if I had learned anything. And I wrote it, it came easier and it was quicker. The production of it was quicker. The third one, this is pretty interesting, I think, from an author's point of view. There's 12 stories. Well, I had 11 stories, and I had a big gap in the timeline between Henry VIII and I don't know, but there was a big gap. So I needed a story to fill the gap. So I wrote the 12th story. It took me longer to write that one story than it did to write all 11 of the other ones. And it's not any more complicated, and it's not any more, it's just, why is that? The process fascinates me. I'm an artist. I want to control my medium, and it pretty much controls me. So,
boy, do I hear that. I know it sounds crazy to somebody who hasn't experienced this, but I've literally had the experience of driving down the road and have it pop into my brain what was actually happening in the book.
Yes.
And I go, whoa, I didn't know that was what was going on.
Right, exactly.
It sounds preposterous.
Yes.
But your subconscious mind is creating, long before you sat down to write the book, your subconscious mind was starting to work on this.
Well, yeah, that's true too. And, I've got these 3 books, and I never wrote an outline, never once. Really, I didn't have to do that much research. In they've got real people in them and documented circumstance. And I read a lot of history. There were some, like in this book we're talking about, Piercing the Last Limit, I had to polish up on my classical people, timeline, dates and things of that nature. But Piercing the Last Limit starts off with Julius Caesar. I knew a lot about him, and Roman society and military and political. Then the second part. All of my books are disjointed. at the beginning. You start reading, and then you start reading this other thing and another thing and what is happening, and then they all come together. The trick is not to bore your reader, but to intrigue them and to want them to know what's happening. And my first thing that I wrote, like I said, I gave pieces to people. Well, one of my friends, when I finally said the end on it, I gave it to a friend of mine. And she and I said, don't, judge on grammar. I'm going to fix that. But just read it and let me know what you say, Well, she called me every night for about 3 or 4 nights, as long as it took her to read it. And she said she was asking all the right questions, she was really getting it. And she was enjoying it. And she wished she had more time. She worked for a living. She wished she had more time to finish, And then when she finally finished it, she called me up and said, "You dog," I mean, it was really gratifying. And one of the first reviews of Piercing the Elastic Limit was on Goodreads by a moderator in one of the time travel groups. And he said you had to read the ending with a seatbelt. You had to strap yourself in when you're reading it. So that's a pretty good, and that was one of the first reviews. So yeah, I don't know what's going on, but they do. And the history, the time travel aficionados that will pick you apart, they're blown away by the real history. The real history. It's it doesn't hit you over the head. It's part of the narrative. It's the storyline. So in this Piercing the Elastic Limit, there's a thing on Caesar. There's a thing on Christopher Marlowe, and it goes into the social times, the politics of Elizabethan England. And then there's the part with the music in it, Schumann and Brahms and Mendelssohn and whatnot. And this book came together. They all did. Like you said, what you said about the subconscious. They all come together. All the strands the hooks that you're dangling out there, they all tie together. And I didn't do that. The people did that.
Right. I'm in the process of writing and producing a master class in how to be an author. And one of the comments that I made in one of these classes is that I frequently get about 10 chapters into a story, and I think it's going in one direction, and just something just drops in and it just shifts. It's like goes in an opposite direction.
Yes.
Or something happens that just opens. And I find myself sometimes now, I've done this enough times that I'm thinking, what the point of this is. Where's this going? What is happening here? And then something will coalesce. It'll just drop in.
Yes. Well, that's the case in all of my books. And like I said, you're 3/4 of the way through before you realize what they're trying to do. And by that time you're invested and you want to know if they're going to be able to do it.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's a very gratifying thing when it comes together.
Do you do your own editing?
I do. And then other people, I wouldn't call them beta readers per se, but I farm it out to people as I'm going. So my mother, who was a classically trained professional musician, she's deceased now. She read she in fact gave me the Piercing the Elastic Limit is here because of her. It's dedicated to her. So I had a thing on Caesar that I was writing because I knew that Caesar had won the civil war against Pompey the Great at the Battle of Munda, in southern Iberia in Spain. Mm-hmm. Okay, then he went back to Italy, and he was the uncontested, big guy, and they made him dictator for life, and he was murdered. So in Spain, I have him meet time travelers, and they're wanting something from him. Okay, then I wrote about Marlowe, who was a literary genius. He was a playwright. He wrote books. He wrote essays. He also, many historians believe he was a spy during the Elizabethan times, which is not abnormal because the place was a police state. Everybody was reporting something to somebody, and anything that happened was going to get back one way or another. And everybody knew it. They didn't weird them out. It was just the way it was. Okay. Marlowe was murdered, just like Caesar. So I called up my mother, who's taught music, piano and theory for 51 years, and went to the American Conservatory of Music. So, she had a scholarship and finished in 3 years as opposed to 4. I said, look, I got this thing on Caesar. I got this thing on Marlowe. They were both murdered. I need a classical musician that was murdered. She said, give me a minute. So I went from my desk into the kitchen. I was pouring coffee. It wasn't 30 seconds. The phone rang. And I went back. She said, Schumann. And I said, Schumann was murdered? She said, no, but he died in an insane asylum. So I said, I can work with that.
Even better, right?
Yes. And the more I dug into him, the more interesting he was, because he wrote a very influential journal. He practically invented the study of music. And he didn't make any money off of it. He was very famous for it. He was famous not for being for a composer, not until after he was dead. Clara, his wife, ran the family and paid for everything. He tried to be a concert master. He tried to do, he never made any money. The journal was famous, but the printing costs were high. So he didn't have any ready money from it. And so the book wouldn't be here without her. She led me on this path, and he was a rich, rich character. He knew all the musicians of the day. And he died in an insane asylum, and also exacting details of what his doctors, the therapy they employed, it's documented. Brahms, who was there, because he would visit him, he wrote detailed letters, and later they were rewritten and published for posterity. So we know exactly who Schumann's doctors were and what they did. And we know his symptoms and what, happened to him. And so it was very, very rich. So I did have to do some research there in terms of the history. But usually the only research I have to do historically is just firming up dates and things of that nature, because I read a lot of history.
What advice would you give to new authors as people are looking at this and they're thinking, boy, I've got this story, or what advice would you give them?
Well, never give up, for one thing. But here's the deal. When I started writing books, like I said, I'm an artist. This was just another medium I was trying to, investigate and to conquer if I could. I knew I wasn't Tolstoy. I knew I wasn't Hemingway. So I had some rules. I did have rules. I didn't have an outline, but I had rules. And one of them was, like Burroughs, it had to be a page turner. Edgar Rice Burroughs, you read his Tarzan short stories.
I've read everything he's ever written 10 times.
Stories especially, the chapters are a page and a half long. Tarzan sees guys walking around in the tall grass, he gets in the tree and the snake grabs him. That's the end of the chapter. Then you turn the page. He jumps in the river. The snake lets go. And he, swims up to the grass. He sees the people have guns, and the lion jumps on him, and so, the narrative is very, very quick. So all my stories are page turners. Then I wanted them to have an O. Henry ending. You read O. Henry, you're going down a street and you think you know what's happening, and you get hit in the head with a brick from some other direction. It's just a very interesting twist. And then I base myself on Dickens, because Dickens sold very few novels in his lifetime, but he sold to the penny papers, they called them. He was published in the papers, and the literate people would read the stories every week, the chapters, to the illiterates on the street corner, and his stories, his chapters are like little books. They have a beginning and a middle and an end. So that was the only thing I held myself to. There had to be a page turner. They had to have a beginning and a middle and an end to each chapter. and it had to smack you in the face from some unknown source, or whatever. And that has held me true.
Excellent. Yeah, it's I understand the rules thing. I've got a few of my own that when I got started writing, because like you, avid reader, and that was how I got started half a dozen, not quite 6 years ago, I guess, but close to it. So I was reading yet another book, and I got about a chapter or two into it, and I just tossed it on the table and said, man, I can write better than that. And sometimes these were highly published, well acclaimed authors, and like you said, it's just like, no, I don't want to read a book where the dog runs alongside the bicycle, leans down, picks up a stick and jams it in the spokes and trips the rider. I mean, dogs don't do that, right? And there's a lot of that. And that was one of my rules, was that one I didn't want to Hollywoodize my characters. I wanted them to be extremely authentic to who they were. And
Right.
Some of those kinds of rules. So I do think that those are important. Whatever those rules are for you as a writer, that's going to provide a framework that you can work around.
Well, it lent itself to the point where I had my voice. So my stories are very simple, and there's very little description there. Basically, they're dialogue driven. And, I don't describe in detail I mean, there is description. I'm not trying to say that, but I'm not going to describe in detail the spaceship or what the uniforms look like or what, I'm unconcerned with that. That's for the reader to fill in. And they do very well because they're universal tales. Everybody has lost in love. Everybody has been at the end of the rope. Everybody has hated their job, and so you can play off these things, and people are drawn to them. And you can also use mythology to make to allow the people to draw their own conclusions.
I like the fact that you have specific authors that you have looked at as a meter for you, that this is something that you wanted to maybe not reproduce in the carbon copy sense, but that they were your muses almost in how you wanted to do.
They held me to a formula that I was. Yes, I'll agree with you there. I knew I wasn't Hemingway or Tolstoy, and you asked your broader question about what would I tell would-be authors. Well, I would tell them to be true to yourself and don't follow any rules arbitrarily, show not tell, or don't use ly words, instead of describing the situation and saying, instead of using an adverb for it to add emphasis. But Hemingway used ly words, and it didn't slow him down, and the flow is quick and the pace, and he was a tremendous artist. And show not tell, that's the big bugaboo for people who supposedly know how to write and are telling other people how to do it. Well, if it's my one rule, if you will, is don't bore your reader. And if showing and not telling gets it out of the way, or background or whatever, and you can continue on with the story and it's not dragging, if it's intriguing and not boring, then you don't need any kind of rule beyond, don't write a bad sentence. And right. So that's what I would say. Never give up. You can always change what's written. You can never change an idea. Oh, I've got an idea for this. People come up to me all the time, or emails or whatnot, in groups, discussions. I've got this great idea, the guy does this and this and that, a lot to do this and that. Well, that's fine, but that's not a book. You've got to be dedicated. I'm retired now, but when I wrote the first book, which is not the one we're talking about, I'd get up in the morning and I'd type on my ancient computer, and I'd come home at night and type on my ancient computer. I made the time. And of course, the first one, I wasn't on a deadline. I never thought, I didn't really even care if I finished it or not. I just wanted to know if I could finish it, which I did finally. So, and then I polished it and then I published it. So, don't give up. If you choose words as your palette, don't listen to anybody else, what they say. As long as you think it's good, and you have to convey your thoughts. People can't read your mind. If you write something and you think it's great because you know where the motivation is and they don't, then that's not good writing. But if words are your palette, then paint until you are satisfied, regardless of what somebody else says. And then once it's over, then you can get it criticized. And, if it's constructive criticism, then heed it. If it's not, then disagree with it.
I did something very similar to what you described, and people have heard my story. It's repetitious, but I finished about 15 chapters, and I never sat down and said, I'm going to write a book, much less I'm going to write 9 books in a series. I just sat down and started writing, and I just said, gee, what do I know? What do I know about? And I just kind of started throwing this stuff on a piece of, on the metaphoric piece of paper on the computer. Got about 15 chapters in. I thought, what if this is any good? And I sent it to 12 friends, and one of which is my son. And everybody pretty much got back to me and said, oh man, this is awesome. When can I have more chapters? And my son got back to me and said, yeah, this is crap. And really, he walked me piece by piece through this. He was right. The story was good, but the writing was bad.
Right.
And he pointed out the issues because and I've done tons of professional writing, business writing, legal writing. I'd never really written any stories per se, but yeah, he showed me that my lack of skill in writing was interfering with the story. I committed a classic writer's crime, was that I started with first person present tense.
Yes.
And boy, that became, as I went on, extremely difficult. Can you imagine writing 9 novels? Eventually the stories came, and that would be just impossible. It would be horrible.
Or have a break and go from another perspective. Yes, it's very difficult.
Yeah, it's hard in a transition.
Well, I tried to eliminate the difficult things. So I write time travel. You got to have a working theory. You got to have a working machine. Well, I don't know how to do that, but they did. And so the way the things are presented, it's already in place and up and running. And, for me, so all of my books have in the title, The Elastic Limit. So this is jargon in the books for time. You have to understand what the elastic limit is. You have to know how to manipulate it. You have to have machinery that allows you to manipulate it in order to time travel. But it's also a metaphor for your imagination. So my first book was called Beyond the Elastic Limit. It's beyond your imagination. This one we're talking about with Schumann and Marlowe and Caesar. It's called Piercing Your the Elastic Limit. It blows your imagination away. And the short stories are tales of the elastic limit. They're tales for your imagination. I don't know what to tell you. It's my own thing. And, in terms of time travel, I can explain paradox, which is the big bugaboo of time travel. My theory does, at least, if you implement it correctly. And more importantly, for the thrust of most of the stories, the hardware breaks down. They have to figure out some other way. The whole point of this book, why the time travelers are contacting people through history, is because they're having trouble. Well, the time travelers also have they have people going after them, and they're dealing with other things. But the thrust of what you've been reading is to permit them to be able to carry on with their mandate. They have a quest, and it's I don't know. It just all works out. It's very exciting. the books defy classification. They're mystery tales, they're adventure tales, they're love stories, they're sci-fi, they're historical fiction. Go on and on and on, and they're unique. The from the sci-fi point of view, let me tell you, for the last 5 years, I have been published in an international sci-fi anthology, the Science Fiction Novelists Anthology. The new one just came out a week or two ago, and they take 2 submissions a year. I was too late for the first year, which was 2021, I believe. So I sent them every year. I send them 2 submissions, and each year they have accepted both and published both. So this is the 10th. I'll have 10 stories published in this anthology, and it's an international thing. People from all over the world put into it. And last year did very well. This year, the pre-sales were 4 times what they were last year. So, and it's a lot thicker. I just got my copy. Excuse me. I just got my copy the other day, and it's thicker than any of the other volumes. So that's very gratifying as well.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, time travel, if you could go to any other time of history, what would that time period be? If you could pick it.
People ask me that all the time, and there's I want to know where Alexander's buried. I want, there are questions unanswered by history. But I guess the biggest thing is I'd go back to biblical times. Check that out. That's really changed the world, and rather in a bigger way than anything else, especially the Western world, but even the entire world, because of the way the theology of the times has changed world events, but certainly Western events. And if you'd like to check that out, I'd be that'd be like tempting fate, though. I don't know if I would go there. That's
I have to admit that's an intriguing one for me also. I spent 45 years studying scripture in the Greek, Hebrew, and Arabic, and it is fascinating. It's somewhat frustrating because of what you uncover and what you see, right? But it's amazing to watch as a culture progresses for several thousand years, right? Of what that was and how it was intertwined with so much of history. I agree. Interesting period.
That background in terms of languages, but I did go to a Bible school, but I majored in science. And, now I write time travel, sci-fi. So I'm well-rounded. I read a lot of history, and in one of the short stories, I reconcile the paradox between science and religion, and it's in a historical framework, a historical fiction framework. It's a story about Thomas Jefferson. And he's checking out fossils that have been sent back from not the Lewis and Clark expedition, but other expeditions that he sent out. And these are real things, and they really happened. And, the people involved are real, but they tackle the point of the story is to reconcile science and religion. There is no conflict as far as I'm concerned. And if you look at both as a discipline, as a branch of philosophy.
I write about this often, not in my novels per se, but in some of my blog posts and things like that. And I totally agree with you. I entered the University of Washington as a National Merit Scholar and a biology student.
Really?
And when I was there, I very quickly found a conflict. And that is that they were teaching something that's mathematically so improbable that it's essentially impossible. And
Yes.
when I brought that up, that the mathematical improbability was so great that it just couldn't happen, that I was told, well, we understand that it's basically mathematically impossible, but it's what we believe. And that was when I came to understand that most of institutional science today is actually a religion. It's about belief and about ideology. It's not really about science. So yeah, I know well, you and I have a lot of alignment. This is really interesting because we're quite different. I am the least creative person that you could probably imagine, other than my books. I can't draw a circle with a curd jar and a pencil and a piece of paper, right? I just, I'm totally not artistic, and yet somehow in this medium I can write, because like you, there's somewhere inside me was a storyteller.
Right.
And
Yes.
so I agree. And it sounds like I'm always telling people, just write, just write, just sit down and just
don't give up. If you put it on paper, you can always edit it, change it, move it around. But if
delete it if you don't like.
Yes, but you can't do any of that unless you put it down. So,
one of the things that I've taught often to my business teams in that is to sit down and write the worst thing you can imagine. I mean, just write something that you think is just trash, just horrible. Yes. Now, you're never going to write anything that bad again, and you survived it, so just move on. Right?
Yes, okay. Reverse psychology. Yeah,
well, everybody's so worried that, well, maybe it won't be good, or maybe whatever. Okay, fine, but maybe it will be.
Well, that's why I write with a pen name, because I didn't want to be blamed if it was bad.
Yeah, well, probably smarter than me. I put myself out there too much sometimes. I do think that there is a truth that you touched on. That is, the first thing you write, the first thing you create, it's probably not going to be brilliant.
Right.
But that doesn't predetermine what it's going to be as you grow, as you progress, and in truth, as your creation does. I'm amazed sometimes at the sculptors, the old story, but how did you figure out, how to do that horse? And he said, well, I just took this lump of clay and I removed everything that wasn't the horse. Yeah. that thing. And so, yeah, I'm sure that whoever the most brilliant artist was, painter, whatever, the first thing they did when they were a kid probably wasn't.
Like I say, it took me, I got better at what I did. And, it was about my second rewrite in the first book that I found my voice. And then it just flowed. And if I got stuck, like I said, I would just reread what I had. You just got to do. You can't just think about doing. That's my theory.
Right. I like it. Well, Howard Loring, I'm just so thrilled to be able to spend this time with you. And now we're going to take some time after this. You've sent me the audio. It's actually an MP4 file that I downloaded of your reading that Melissa did for you. It's just been great visiting with you, and I appreciate you so much. And thank you for reaching back. I appreciate that.
I really do appreciate it. I had a great time. I don't mind talking about my stuff at all. I would say that if you go to my website, howardloring.com, there is a free stuff page, and you can listen to the podcasts, the short stories that are narrated by Melissa. One of them's actually narrated by Dr. Robinson himself. So go to my free stuff page and just click on the picture.
Where else can people get your books? Are you on Amazon or?
I'm on Amazon. The audio book of Piercing the Elastic Limit with Melissa, that's on Audible and on everything. It's there's like 15 different, it's on Nook, it's on the Walmart thing, whatever that is, and it's Nook is Barnes and Noble.
Right.
Audible, Amazon. I also have vast YouTube videos and there'll be 5 or 6 of them there, but you got to keep scrolling. There are dozens of them. I train a dinosaur. I take people back in time to on a bus, the bus loads of people, and bring them safely back to the current reality. I repair my time machine. It's all tongue in cheek, but there's at least a dozen videos. So yeah, you can check me out. Go to www.howardloring.com, and that's my website.
Part 1. The Encounter Begins. Chapter 1. The Oracle of Munda. Caesar was displeased, and it was most evident. This was a unique happenstance. The great man was an expert at possessing a stiff and unreadable, grand and imposing demeanor. Not today. It was hot for one thing, and Caesar wore full armor. But that wasn't the reason for his displeasure. As a rule, he thrived on camp life, embracing as an adventure the hardships it entailed, although his life there was far less harsh than that of his troops. Even on campaign, his daily needs were always well looked after. But today, his physical discomfort was not a concern. Instead, he was focused on the one thing in his life that always got to him in the end. The general was impatient. "How much longer?" he loudly inquired of no one in particular as he reined in his horse. The cohort that rode escort behind him, a double column less than 100 strong, halted their slow pace at this outburst. 2 of the men dutifully trotted up to flank the great man, one on either side of him. "We're close, sir," said the legionnaire on his right, as the one on his left held forth a goat-skinned pouch of water. "If our information was correct, the guide should be very close by now," added the soldier, a centurion. "Shall I send someone ahead?" Caesar had taken the water pouch, but did not drink. He looked out across the far-reaching plain, resigned. Then he squinted and leaned forward in his saddle. "I see him," he said, almost to himself. The 2 men followed his determined gaze. A small speck in the distance revealed that someone on foot was moving toward them. "Yes," Caesar said, in an answer to the legionnaire's question. "Send someone with a horse to fetch him." The centurion gave a Roman salute by banging his fist on his chest, then thrusting his arm out before him, fingers extended. He began to turn his steed to implement the command, but was stopped before he could. "Dismount the men," Caesar added. "Permit them and their horses a drink." The centurion saluted again, barking the orders. As Caesar at last took some water, a soldier rode up from the rear. He was a young officer, but already tested in battle. Just yesterday he had commanded a wing of cavalry in Caesar's latest engagement on the barren plains of Munda in southern Iberia. Such a heavy responsibility was unusual for a man his age, but he possessed excellent references. The soldier, highly motivated, was also best friend to the young son of Asia, Caesar's much-loved favorite niece. And Caesar placed a high value on the shrewd opinion of her boy, his great-nephew, Octavian. Octavian later became the first Roman emperor, Augustus. The new Caesar would greatly benefit through the glorious achievements gained by this young officer, who by then had grown into his most illustrious general. As with many successful commanders, his military capacity would possess a dual nature. He would prove himself both competent and lucky. "Stopped for some sightseeing, have we?" he asked. As a rider blasted by leading an unoccupied horse, Caesar handed over the water pouch. His outlook had improved, his impatience now gone. He pointed towards the distant figure. "Not quite yet, Marcus Vipsanius," he said, using as an endearment the commander's first 2 names only. "But if this be our guide, I plan to see much very soon. Much indeed, I hope." "It takes a brave man to look into the future," philosophically answered the younger warrior. "It's true," boasted Caesar. Then, as an afterthought, he added,
Or a foolish one, but I'm nothing if not headstrong.
It served you well enough, I'd say. Just ask them at Munda, was the other's wry comment.
The battle may be over,
reminded the older, more experienced man.
but the city remains. It is always so, Agrippa. Warfare, even when conducted well, is never tidy.
The regrouped army of the already defeated Pompey Magnus, Caesar's principal enemy in the current civil war, had been broken on the dry plains of Munda, but some troops had retreated the day before, unscathed, into the fortified city. Yet, uncharacteristically, it was Caesar's loyal and efficient legate, Quintus Fabius Maximus, besieging the place as they spoke, for Caesar had held other plans. Before mopping up the province with his legions, he first had chosen to indulge himself with this side trip, aided only by a small detachment. Still, this cohort, part of the legendary 5th Legion, was famous throughout the Republic for its raw courage and ability. Last year, it had faced and repulsed the enemy's 60 war elephants at the bitter Battle of Thapsus in northern Africa. Attacking elephants was a tricky business, especially at close range. The enraged beasts were capable of anything. Always they went berserk, in some fashion. But the 5th Legion had faced them alone. As usual, Caesar was well outnumbered, and no other troops had been available to hold his flank. At short distance, this cohort had shot them full of arrows, while the rest of the 5th, about 3,000 men, had raised an unearthly din by screaming as loudly as they could while banging on their shields with their sword hilts. The wounded and terrified elephants had turned en masse and viciously stomped through their own troops. Marcus Agrippa nodded at Caesar's observation and drank some water, then handed the pouch back to him. He in turn passed it over to the waiting soldier, still at his other side, and then dismissed the man with a slight smile and a flick of his hand. The figure in the distance was mounting the horse, Caesar noted. "How far to the oracle?" asked Agrippa, who had not been privy to any plans beyond command of the cohort. He knew their destination, of course, but not the details, and being under Caesar's spell, he was most eager to please.
I have no idea,
was the reply.
We've much daylight left, but no matter. I will see the oracle before I see my legions.
Caesar removed his helmet and placed it under his arm. Then he wiped the grit from his face with the heel of his hand. Next, the general stood straighter in the saddle. The young commander could tell that Caesar was thinking over his upcoming audience with the mysterious Oracle of Munda. Indeed, he was already there in his mind's eye. While viewing the oracle as an opportunity not to be missed, he still planned the encounter, as he would any strategy for battle or politics. Gaius Julius Caesar was an amazing man, his grasp of all things immense, and the youthful Agrippa was lucky to be, by circumstance, so close now within his sphere. The advancing riders were nigh, both now slowing to a trot a few hundred paces away. The guide was wrapped in a long robe with a hood that covered the face. Caesar's horse snorted and kicked his head a few times at their approach. "He rides well," observed Agrippa.
Yes,
answered Caesar slowly, replacing his helmet.
Let's hope he can gallop us to the oracle without delay. I find my impatience somehow returning.
But patience is a wonderful virtue, laughed the youthful soldier. Or so I've always been told.
That's the difference between us,
said Caesar.
You wait for your future, Marcus, as most men do.
He turned and looked the young commander in the face, adding,
But my future awaits me.
Then he kicked his horse, the better to meet his future head on. Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa watched as Caesar conversed with the newcomer. The three, Caesar, the hooded guide, and the legionnaire who had led the horse, were about 20 paces away, too far to hear what was being said. After an interval, Caesar turned.
Centurion!
He called out, and the legionnaire patiently waiting behind Agrippa nudged his horse forward. Caesar then locked his eyes with Agrippa's and called him over also, with a wave of his hand. The great man was smiling.
"We're close, after all,"
Caesar announced, once the warriors trotted up.
"Only a league or two away. Bivouac the cohort here and feed the men well,"
he ordered the centurion.
"I shall return tomorrow, after I've met with the oracle."
The centurion, a hardened veteran who loved Caesar, nodded, saying,
"Sir."
But it was clear that he didn't think much of this idea. Yet his lesser station prevented him from questioning such a dictate. Instead, with a horrified face, he looked towards the young commander for some sort of intervention.
"Fear not, old comrade,"
Caesar said to reassure him, and for emphasis he then leaned over and patted the soldier's arm.
"The guide will stand as hostage here, and Marcus Agrippa shall accompany me. All will be well."
"Caesar," Agrippa interjected, "must it be so?" He didn't think much of this idea either. "I fear the cohort will not understand such bizarre orders," he earnestly added. This observation caused Caesar to laugh aloud. He knew his troops far better than this young man did. There was nothing they would deny him. Of that, he was sure.
"Place sentries as usual,"
Caesar decreed to his centurion, ignoring Agrippa's concern.
"Where I go, they cannot follow. I shall return tomorrow, have no doubt."
"Sir," said the legionnaire. But still, he didn't like it.
"And treat the guide well. She's not to be harmed in any way."
Caesar next ordered the centurion. "She?" said Agrippa, surprised as he cast his eyes to the hooded rider, whose face was still hidden. The guide pulled back the hood, and a pretty face was revealed. The young woman had deep crimson curls and pale skin, with great green eyes and high cheekbones. Not the usual for southern Spain, Agrippa knew. "But why no escort?" he asked of Caesar, even though he continued to look at the girl. She met his gaze. Then she smiled. "It's forbidden," she answered in a soft voice. This made Agrippa laugh. "Forbidden?" the commander scoffed in contempt. "We're Romans. We need no permission."
"Enough,"
stated Caesar.
"Time waits for no man. I've made my decision, Marcus Agrippa."
He nodded to the centurion, who knew his duty. The soldier first gave a sharp salute, and then bent to grab the harness of the guide's horse. He next led her away, while the other legionnaire slowly followed, a few paces behind. Agrippa watched her go, and as her head turned to keep looking at him, her sly smile remained intact. At last, she straightened and pulled up her hood. He had never met such a self-assured woman. Caesar, not to be held back, turned his horse. Agrippa followed suit and pulled up beside him. Then the two cantered off towards whence the girl had come. "She hasn't bewitched you, has she?" the cautious Agrippa now asked of Caesar, only half joking.
"Not at all,"
was his pleasant reply.
"She merely explained the protocol involved. Yet the young woman, with only a glance, seems to have cast quite a spell on you."
"She's no native," countered Agrippa. "Why should you trust her? It could be a trap, you know, one sprung by someone clever."
"More clever than me, you mean?"
asked Caesar with a pout.
"Not a rousing vote of confidence, I dare say. I would have expected better from you, Marcus."
They both laughed at this exchange. "So where is it?" the young officer asked.
"Only a few leagues ahead."
Caesar answered with good cheer.
"A fine thing, too. I'm getting hungry."
"I as well, Caesar," agreed Agrippa. "But how, may I ask, do you know that they'll feed us?"
"It's an oracle, Marcus,"
lectured the great man.
"Don't you see? How would an oracle not know we were hungry?"
They laughed again and galloped away. The centurion ordered the supply wagon forward and then sat the guide by it. No one approached her. After a bit, she stretched prone on the ground between the wagon's wheels, as if to sleep. Sentries were quickly set, several fires were then started, and food was soon cooked for the cohort. After this was accomplished, the centurion took the guide a bowl of hot gruel. Standing above her, he called out, but she did not answer him, and thinking her asleep, he bent down to shake her awake. But when he grabbed her robe, he found to his consternation that the garment was empty, and she gone. The old warrior jumped up, cursing, and pitched the bowl away. He had known nothing good would come of this business. Turning in a slow circle, the centurion scanned the vast plain surrounding him, but already knew that she had not absconded on foot. "Sorceress!" the man spat in open disgust. Then he thought of Caesar, alone save one young officer, and both in unknown territory. "Saddle a horse!" he screamed. One was brought to him straight away, for on maneuvers, some of the animals were kept in readiness at all times. He mounted and took a second to scan the area again, this time from his higher vantage. Again, he saw no one. "Set double sentries!" The centurion quickly ordered his second in command, a large veteran with many scars across his face. "Send out pickets, but keep them in sight. There's witchery afoot. I'm off for Caesar." He added, "Protect the cohort." He kicked the horse and shot out across the plain in the direction that Caesar had taken. He rode the animal hard, at full gallop, till long after it had a full lather, and then slowed to a trot, hoping to get its wind up for another go. Instead, he saw something in the far distance and slowed his mount again to a walk. This particular centurion was well versed in the various arts of war. Even from such a long-range view, he easily recognized a large grouping of people, scattered somewhat but clustered overall in one general area. Nomads? He kept to a straight line, as the flat plain denied him any flanking maneuver, and veering off would have just presented a larger profile. He clomped even closer, squinting all the way. After a few minutes, though, he pulled up, for he realized that he'd seen this same silhouette many times before. These were soldiers before him, and he knew it. Most were at leisure, with some sitting, some walking around the camp's fires, but many were tending a large group of horses held off to one side. Now this was a very interesting turn. The enemy was bottled up at Munda, but here was a substantial force, a cohort's number at least. Perhaps they were a local tribe, but this flew against the general opinion of things. Caesar had been assured the population had long ago fled the vicinity in terror to escape the rampaging legions of Pompey the Great. He once more nudged the steed into a walking pace. The animal's breathing was no longer labored, but still it was wet with sweat. Nevertheless, his horse seemed content to be on the move. Soon, the old legionnaire noticed a few mounted men, pickets no doubt, trotting the camp's periphery, and he wondered how close he could come before they spied him. He was armed only with his sword, but that would have to do if things became sticky. Perhaps they wouldn't, one never knew. It didn't matter anyway, for his duty compelled him forward, and he would die to carry it out if need be. The centurion had to find Caesar, in his mind, to assure his safety, although he knew that the great man would scoff at such concern. Once he found him safe, he would report the mysterious disappearance of the guide. He knew Caesar might be displeased that he had left his post for such a fool's errand, but he would take that chance, betting Caesar would understand his position. Yet he never got the chance. At last, the pickets saw him. First, they clustered in the distance, talking things over. But soon enough, 2 riders broke loose and headed his way. The centurion put his hand on his well-used sword, but he didn't draw it, just yet. Things now took a more baffling twist, for as the sentries rapidly approached, the old warrior noticed that they were Roman. This made no sense at all. Before the battle on the plains, all of Pompey's troops had been accounted for, and Caesar's legions also were far away, encamped at Munda. Still, the soldier felt relieved as he kicked his horse into a gallop. If Caesar and Agrippa had come across the same group, perhaps they were still with them, or at least knew where they were. Perhaps, he thought, there was nothing to fear at all. But when the riders met, the centurion was shocked anew. And he wasn't the only one. The pickets before him were his own troops, the same men that he had left an hour ago. The centurion cursed and turned in his saddle to look behind him. The vast plain was bare as far as the eye could see. The surprised man knew that he had not circled back, that he had kept to a straightforward bearing. He was sure. "Sir, we thought you rode the other way," observed one of the two perplexed legionnaires. "You haven't moved camp, have you?" the centurion asked the men. But the very idea was ridiculous. Even if they had moved, they could not have arrived there before him. He cursed again, already knowing what their answer would be. "Sir, we haven't moved a pace," said the other picket. "Those were your orders, weren't they? To hold our position?" "And to post double sentries for added protection of the cohort," stated the first mystified soldier. "Blast it!" screamed the centurion in true exasperation. "This is evil magic, boys, for the gods have turned things around, and that's a fact." The warrior cursed yet again. The pair of bewildered pickets looked to each other with blanched faces at this observation, neither one knowing what it would augur. Nothing good, they reasoned, although they didn't say so. It wasn't their place to worry over details anyway. Just do what they were told, regardless of what it happened to be. The centurion was different. He did concern himself with the detail, for that was his job. And he was in command of the cohort. Yet this one stymied him, all the same. How could you move forward if you just ended up where you started? He was stupefied. "So what now, sir?" asked the first soldier. By this time, a couple of other pickets had ridden over at a full gallop, the dust of the plain kicking up at their approach. The centurion recognized one as his second in command. The grizzled legionnaire was surprised, but nonplussed, to see his superior here, at the rear of the cohort's position. "Enjoy your ride?" he asked with a bland face. The centurion glared at him. It was obvious to the newcomer that something out of the ordinary had happened. The second had seen the same look many times before. "Where's Caesar?" he asked. Turning serious. "It took you long enough to see me," the centurion growled at him, evading the inquiry. He kicked his horse, nudging through the men. They fell in around him. "We saw you well enough," answered the man with the scars on his face. "We just didn't know if you'd turn away from us. Where's Caesar?" he asked once more. The centurion shook his head in disgust. To try again would just be tempting the same gods who had let him off the hook so easily this time. Under the circumstances, it was evident that the cohort could do nothing, and that Caesar and Agrippa were destined to see the mysterious Oracle of Munda alone. "I haven't the faintest idea," he said in answer. "We're not meant to know, it seems to me. We'll just wait as commanded." "And tomorrow?" asked his second. "What happens tomorrow if they don't show up? How long do we hold the cohort in check?" The centurion considered this baffling situation. This seasoned legionnaire was a good tactician, having learned much from long experience, and the answer came to him quickly. In the Roman army, standard procedure was always a logical progression. "If tomorrow they fail to arrive, we'll try again with the whole cohort moving forward," he said. "But I doubt that will get us anywhere. Still, we'll put in a day looking for them. After that, we'll turn and report back to Munda and let our betters deal with it." The man with the scarred face nodded, easily concurring. It made good sense, and it covered their collective ass. If Caesar were gone, there'd be hell to pay by someone. He thought next of the cohort's comfort. Warm gruel for 3 more days would not go over well with them. He knew. Soldiers loved meat, and could consume copious amounts. The second then smiled for the first time. Because of the many scars on his face, the movement gave him a devilish appearance. But he knew standard procedure also. "See any game on your ride?" he asked of the centurion. "A bit of hunting would be good for morale. Some practice with the slings and darts as we searched the area." It was the centurion who nodded next, as living off the land always was a prudent idea on maneuvers. The beaten man now had done all that he could possibly do, and he felt better because of it. Still, he worried about Caesar's fate. Yet at the time, Caesar and Agrippa were only 2 leagues away. A Roman league was loosely defined by how far a man or horse could walk in an hour. Of course, some walked faster and some slower than others did, so the measurement wasn't an exact standardized length, but only an average distance. Riding with alacrity permitted a quicker pace, but to husband their horses' strength, they had galloped for only a short while. Yet a trotting steed covered good ground in the long run. Their mounts, which were used to a full day's work, clipped on with ease. After about an hour, the 2 stopped at the ledge of a large crevasse, a deep gash in the flat plain, unseen on the horizon before they were up on it. Next, they dismounted and cautiously walked the horses down the steep embankment. Once beneath the lip of the giant trench, they vanished from sight, the visible plain again rendered desolate to any observer's view. Caesar knew the way, following explicit instructions given to him by the mysterious, hooded guide. There was a thin stream at the base of the rugged crevasse, and Caesar directed that they turn and follow the meandering current. The great man was excited now, knowing that they were close. Soon, the banks of the gentle branch grew rocky, with larger stones giving way to boulders of a more substantial size. This forced a slower transit, with the 2 Romans gingerly picking their way, still leading their horses. At last, they reached a point where they saw beyond the water's edge a huge rock face, flat and larger than a man was tall, embedded within the embankment.
"This is it,"
Caesar said, satisfied. He pointed to a bend in the creek where lush grasses grew.
"Let's water the horses and wait."
Agrippa was glad to stop, but he was confused. He saw no oracle here. He saw nothing that gave credence to any habitation. Regardless, the great man plunged forward, boldly stepping into the shallow stream and sloshing across with his horse in tow. Agrippa followed in his wake. The animals drank deeply and then started to munch the tasty vegetation. Caesar removed his helmet and sword and tossed them to the ground. He began to unbuckle his ornate breastplate, but was having trouble. His attendants usually accomplished the task, whilst he just stood regally with his outstretched arms.
"Is that wise?"
asked Agrippa. The setting was pleasant enough, but unknown, and the young commander was a good soldier. Appearances could be deceiving. Caesar laughed for the first time in an hour. At last, he managed the buckles, and his elaborate and heavy armor broke away. He tossed it to the ground as well.
"We're in no danger, Marcus,"
he said, while staring at the water.
"We'd be dead already if that were the case."
And then he added,
"Should I bathe before my audience?"
Agrippa was tired, and his feet hurt from stomping the rocky trail. He sat down on a boulder with his back to the rock slab and slowly removed his own helmet. Yet he didn't take off his armor and kept his hand on his sword's hilt.
"I don't know,"
was his dry reply.
"I'm ignorant of the proper protocol. I'm not the one who talked it over with the girl." "It's simple,"
answered Caesar, amused.
"We just wait."
"Wait?" said Agrippa, unbelieving.
"Wait here? But there's nothing here. What are we waiting for?"
Caesar sat next to Agrippa, his back also to the large stone face.
"Not what, but whom?"
he whispered with a gleam in his eye.
"We await the guide, my boy. It's all been arranged. You'll see."
Agrippa was growing exasperated. This was not a good thing, considering it was Caesar who was exasperating him. He was past weary of speaking in riddles, and wanted some straight answers. "Another guide?" the bewildered commander asked, but Caesar had no chance to reply to him. "No," said a voice from across the stream. Both men turned and saw on the other side of the water the girl they had left with the cohort. Agrippa cursed and jumped up, drawing his sword. The girl now wore a peasant's dress in lieu of her long robe. But she still smiled the same sly smile. "Not another," she continued. "It has always been so. I am the only guide there is to the powerful Oracle of Munda." Understanding this cryptic statement, Caesar, while grinning widely, clapped his hands a few times and then stood.
"Wonderful, my dear," he said to her. "I didn't think that you could do it. My centurion must be fit to be tied."
The younger man was dumbfounded. The pair of Romans had arrived here only through heavy exertion, but she had just appeared, out of nowhere. Yet it seemed the joke was on him, for Caesar was unsurprised by her presence. The great man took pity on his younger companion, and reaching over, he touched Agrippa's shoulder, sternly saying,
"No need of that, Marcus. Put the sword away."
At first, Agrippa didn't obey, for as a soldier, he felt better in any unknown situation, holding his weapon. Then his fierce stance, under these bizarre circumstances, seemed ludicrous. He replaced the sword, the hilt kissing his scabbard, with a sharp concussion. "Where's the damn oracle?" he hissed at the girl. In answer, she pointed behind the warriors. They both turned and looked. A large rock face now held a dark opening, an arched portal, an entryway beckoning.
"Ah,"
marveled Caesar.
"I never would have thought of that."
"This is madness," cried Agrippa. "Who knows what dangers may lurk beyond such a hellhole? We'd be insane to enter."
"Not we, Marcus,"
the confident general advised his concerned escort.
"I go only. The guide, as I said before, will stand as hostage in my stead. But now, here with you."
"Caesar, no!" bellowed Agrippa, horrified by the idea. "I go where you go. It must be so." Caesar shook his head. It would not be so. He had made his decision and therefore would meet his future alone.
"All will be well."
He tried to reassure Agrippa, and then he changed the subject.
"Why don't you relax with a bath?"
he asked, pointing to the stream. And then the great man whispered,
"Perhaps if you're nice, she'll scrub you down."
Marcus Agrippa was not amused, but Caesar would not be held in check. He stepped to the entrance and entered the darkened passage without looking back. A second later, the hole disappeared, and the rock face returned as before. Agrippa ran to the slab and placed his palms flush against it. Here was solid stone, and there was no doubting it. This entire episode was beyond belief, he thought, but the surprises were not over yet. When he turned about, the girl was gone.
Can we do it?